This is Power 102 Digital Wednesday. Hard Talk starts now with host Fareed Ali, Steelband Conversations. I'll allow Fareed to introduce his guests. Fareed, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, David. Hope you're doing well. It's good to hear your voice again.
Yes, I'm doing fine.
Today it's a special day. We have no other than Shell Invaders Steel Orchestra, um, two special executive members from their band, uh, Mr. I want to get the pronunciation correct, Mr. Michael Ding Chong and Miss Elizabeth Namsu. To the listening public, Shell Invaders Steel Orchestra is one of the premier steel orchestras in this country. Um, I often have arrangers present or invited around the month leading into Carnival to discuss the arrangement and discuss the band and their music. But when I invite a band before Carnival season, it's a special band. So joining me today is Dr. Richard Tanyok, um, former Panorama judge and highly decorated. Uh, I don't want to say musicologist. He would correct me if I say musicologist. So, Dr. Tanya, thank you for making yourself available. Um, we we we're taking Shell Invaders through a discussion as to what they're about. It's a mid-year review. I like to look at it as a mid-year review just to find out what the band has been doing in the, I don't want to say the off season, because the climate we live in now under this current Pan Trinbago dispensation is we've been promised pan all year, and sometimes I feel it's too much pan. I can't recover from one event in time to go to the next one. Mr. Dim Chong, I know that we have you for a shorter period than we have Miss Namsu. So perhaps we could start by welcoming you and asking you, what have you been up to in the context of your band? What has Shell Invaders been up to of late in terms of its projects and in terms of what next?
Good afternoon, everyone. I think the last time we spoke, it was made public that we had finally gotten the 147 Tragrich Road, the property we have occupied for the lifespan of Invaders, which is approximately 87 years. And we finally got ownership of that lease last year. And right after that, we were blessed with the property next door, compliments our sponsor. So it's been, in the history of Invaders, it is probably one of the most exciting times. It certainly has presented in our history, it presented itself as a milestone. But having said that, it is now a junction or a platform to take off of. So therefore, we have been spending the last 6 months to 9 months really working on a strategic plan for the next 5 to 10 years. This, of course, would include construction, but more than that, more than a building, our strategic plan will encompass revisiting our vision and mission and our goals for the near future, as I said, in the next 5 to 10 years. So much of the time from management level, board level has been taken up with that. And of course, at the same time, we maintain our projects in terms of our music department, where we have home events, where we go out to events when we are invited to and so on. And we were invited to Antigua to perform for Mother's Day, and we did a concert there this year. So, musically, we're still going, the wheels are still turning. And also, as I said, in terms of, should I say, organizational structure and reform, that is much, much, much on the plate right now.
Um, I know I would have asked you on the last occasion, but I have to ask again, given that we have Dr. Tanya with us. How's your music program going in terms of music education for your players? I know that tends to be the new trend now in terms of introducing music education into the band. Um, Most steel bands in the times past learned the music by rote, but technology and the World Wide Web and the exposure that young players get to learning to read music in the school and in the classroom, I'm sure that the band would benefit from same. Likewise, the band would have its own music education program, I would imagine, within the band itself. And that could only facilitate and help in the development and help when you're doing tours and so on. And how's that has been going? I know your arranger lives abroad, so some music education would come in there in terms of him sharing your score or the score of the music with you all. How do you all, what's the plan in terms of music education within the band and developing your players?
Well, as I mentioned before, we are working on our strategic plan, or we have developed, I should say, a strategic plan, and that for now I'll call it a music academy. For now I'll refer to it as that. But there are in our plans room for developing or establishing a music academy, a pan academy. However, as you know, we have a youth band that is 13 years old now, 13 to 14 years, and therefore we have something going on the ground. But the formal aspect of it, as you're referring to, which is music literacy, we have not started that. And I mean, I always say up front, Invaders is a typical pan yard. We are a yard. We are not an what you call it? What they call the other, a pan theater or anything of the sort. We do not have the infrastructure. We do not have classrooms or rooms where we could comfortably educate our younger ones. So we do what we could do. So to answer that question directly, we have not yet embarked on a music literacy program, although it is very, very much on a written program that we have. Where we benefit is that players are coming in more educated, more musically literate. Some of our members are at UTT, some of our members are Dewey, some of our members, do music on the side or what have you. So they're coming in more musically literate. The vast majority still illiterate, but referring to Arden and being abroad, we have enough players that should he send any music, score that music. We have enough players in the band, both the senior and the junior and the youth band, to pass on that music. So when he comes, and as a matter of fact, he does it virtual as well. Sometimes he gives the notes off. We bring him on virtually in the panyard, and he passes on the music from there. So technology has also brought us up, closer to him and maintain that relationship. To the point, should he come on later, he would make mention that he's much more involved in our stateside music now.
Mr. Dinchong, good afternoon, and good afternoon, Ms. Mansur.
Good afternoon.
It's a pleasure to speak with you both. So, first of all, congratulations on getting legal ownership of that property. Long overdue, but I'm so happy that that is now in place. And I want to congratulate you on, you mentioned, that your management is working on a strategic plan and the organizational structure. I always say, too many arts organizations here in Trinidad and Tobago, they just do what they're doing. They're looking at what's immediately in front of them, but they're not thinking ahead and planning for the future. So I applaud you on that. I think, many arts organizations here could learn from this, because we see arts organizations, they come and they go. There's a very dynamic leader who is the face of the band, of the choir, of the theater group, whatever it is. And that person is the driving force. And when they are no longer here, the entire organization collapses. I'm sure you've seen examples of this. So you mentioned a few minutes ago about the vision for Invaders. So for our listening audience, could you just elucidate in broad strokes what that vision is?
Okay, I wouldn't repeat it verbatim, but one, historically, right? We consider ourselves a legendary steel band. We consider that we have a legacy to upkeep, and of course, we have history that is very rich. So that is one of our commitments, to not only educate the public, the world at large, but also to maintain that legacy and to further that legacy. Because I always tell the band, we are living legacy. right? Whilst we might have a rich past, we are creating the past as we speak. That's one. The second thing is entrepreneurial um, ventures, where we recognize that we need to diversify, right? Particularly now that we have some property. And we are not the first band to be doing that, I must say. There are a couple other bands out there in Trinidad who are doing a fantastic job. But we need to follow suit. So we need to diversify in order to bring in income to the organization and not just be dependent on the income we get from performances and so on. So that's one, the other aspect. And the third aspect, of course, is youth development. So those are the three aspects that you will see in our vision.
Excellent, excellent. So this next question could be to Ms. Namsu or yourself, if you'd like to answer it. So you talked about, when we were talking about music literacy in the Panyard, and you talked about, students coming out of UTT and UTT being more musically literate. And that's a great thing. We are far ahead of where we used to be 10 years ago, I would say. But what about this, a young pianist who is not at university, like a brilliant 9-year-old child who has the skills? What do you see, or what should we have for that kind of young player who is not yet at the age to enter a university program?
Well, I'll take that one. First off, what we want to make sure is that they enjoy the experience, right? So when they come to the Panyard, it's not just about learning music. We have what we would call satellite, uh, 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 not subjects, but satellite programs where, for example, we would take them on excursions. We would, go to the movies together. We have them doing things together, not only involved in terms of music, but in terms of their social development and emotional development. So we view our young players in terms of their holistic development. I just want to make that clear out front. So at the beginning, there's not too much, we're not too strict on the formal part of playing the pan. We want them to enjoy that experience, right? And then from there now, we teach the rudiments of the pan in terms of technique and so on, right? But as I mentioned before, we do have on paper a musical literacy program, and we do it, but I don't want to say it's as if we're doing it in full. We do it incidentally. We do teach the notes and the different scales and that sort of thing. But as I said, right now, we're not into it full-fledged, but that is certainly part of our plans.
Great. And I love that you talk about social development. I always say an arts organization, whether it's music, drama, whatever it is, they can only be at their best artistically if there's a community that is bonded. So when I used to run choir, we would have retreats where we're building this bond amongst the team. So I think sports teams do it as well. You're not spending all your time just practicing. So that's so wonderful to hear that you're pursuing that. So I applaud you. I'm sure some of our listening audience may think they know the inner workings of a steel band. Would you either of you care to share with our listeners what are the challenges that face a band like Invaders?
Well, I'd let Liz, you want to start off on this?
I'm sure it's a long list.
Let's start off by saying there are many.
Yeah, but choose maybe the top three.
Top three?
Yeah.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I think the one of the challenge for all steel orchestras, I know you said specifically to Invaders, but it's all steel orchestras, will always be finance. One of the top three. Everybody has to, the instruments are expensive, the tuning is expensive, the transport of instruments is expensive. And then you have to, like any orchestra, you're talking about uniforms, you're talking about, and most of the workload is done by voluntary persons. So, but the general operations of the organization will be a financial challenge. So that's the first challenge I would put up there. I think the second thing would probably be, which would always be, it is a very competitive industry. We have over 100 and whatever numbers of steel bands in Trinidad alone, large bands category, and so it's the competitive industry of itself means that it challenged each and every band, including Invaders, to be innovative, creative, whether it is in their repertoire, their performance routine, how they appear to the public in their customer service, when you have gigs, punctuality, deliverables, quality of performance, and behavioral as well. How you conduct yourself with the client. So from a business aspect. So with that competitive advantage, then probably pricing as well. It's another area. How do you penetrate the market? Because it's a small pie and it's a lot of people trying to get piece of that pie competitively. And the third thing I would say would always be the human resource element of running the organization. Keeping your players involved, and longevity of your players in the organization is the most important thing, because the time and training you put into each individual is a tangible a value and a contribution to the organization, and they are the rock of the organization, the foundation of the organization. So it is with the changing of personalities, changing of times, especially during panorama time with contract players. Your stage side is the most important element in your orchestra, and investing into your human resource and to your players and your stage side, and keeping them not happy, but being feeling part of the growth of the organization is important. And I think that in itself is an important, valuable task that we must accomplish. Those were my three challenges.
That's great. That's great. And this last point about retaining membership, investing in them, and they don't stay. I used to use the analogy. It's like building sandcastles on the beach. You spend all this time building up the personnel, and then the wave comes and you have to start over. Yeah, so I can see that is a big challenge with so much competition in the land. If we could pivot for a second and sort of zoom out and look at how PAN is developing in the nation as a whole, the entire industry. And I want to bring up this model that Venezuela used to build their youth orchestra. So for our listeners, I'll just briefly encapsulate the system that was used in Venezuela. If you can mute your mic, because I'm getting a little feedback. Yeah, so you may or may not know that starting back in the 1970s, there was this brilliant musician in Venezuela who thought music could be used as a tool for social development in underprivileged communities. And of course, this took tremendous resources. It also took support of the government. But what they did, starting in 1975, they hired professional music teachers. And they put a teacher in every small village all around Venezuela, giving music lessons. And this, as I said, It started primarily as a social development program, something to keep the kids occupied after school. And then it grew and it grew. And what happened? Every village, every town developed a little instrumental band because students were learning violin, they were learning percussion, they're learning flute, they're learning saxophone, whatever it was, string bass. And then gradually, each district developed its own youth orchestra. And then those regional youth orchestras, they held national auditions, and that fed into a national orchestra. And it was such a huge success before the current crisis, economic crisis there in Venezuela, that you've probably heard of Gustavo Dudamel, world famous conductor. He's a product of this system in Venezuela. And the National Youth Orchestra of Venezuela has performed all over the world. So do you think a system like that for PAN could work, where we have, no, I see Mr. Dinchong smiling, and I know what you're going to tell me, but I want our viewers and listeners to hear it. But is there a way that the PAN fraternity could work together so that we have one national PAN that could represent the country with the top players drawn from each region or each band? So let me hear.
Okay, well, I would rush to say that that program is existing in Trinidad, right? Of course, the big difference is that the Venezuelan model seemed to be more organized. Ours are happening ad hoc, so I might have a little interest in PAN or whatever, and I have some children in my neighborhood, and I put them together and I use my money or whatever, and then somebody's doing that in Sapari and somebody's doing San Fernando. And I think what we are not doing, and this is an interest of mine, that's why I'm smiling, because I think what we are not doing is getting together and looking for the ideal model. And yet still that ideal model will not be applicable to the particular ban or what have you. But that's not the point. The point is when we highlight what is best practice, then people could pull from that and tweak it to their situation. And I think that is lacking. And one major concern, as you said, youth steel orchestras. That means that there was some kind of guidance or supervision from some authority. We do not have that in Trinidad. Our youth steel orchestra is operating strictly under Invaders, Renegades strictly under Renegades. There are no standards set by the government, Ministry of Youth, PAN Trinbago. There are no standards set such that just like in schools, for example, if a child 5 to 18 years is in an environment, such and such and such and such must happen, meaning to protect their rights, and all those kind of things. And I think that is what is lacking in our system here. So yes, of course, we could, we could have a little competition or a little festival or whatever, and boom, we get a national youth steel orchestra to represent Trinidad. That could happen readily because they are very talented too. But I think, more importantly, I think we need to get these youth steel orchestras properly formalized. I'm not saying that the bands are not doing a good job, but there are a lot of things out there when we're dealing with youths that we need to look at, because we, at the end of the day, those children are leaving their parents' home to come to us, and we are responsible for those 4 hours, 3 hours. And we need to see it that way and what that entails. And I'm saying this, not that is anything new or anything, because it happens in school. When we drop off our children at school, the teachers and the principal know their responsibility for the 6 hours. So similarly, I think we need to know, and I'm not saying that we don't, but we need to make it formal. You know what I'm saying? That's my little personal on that one.
Right. So it's just not a coordinated effort around the country, and it's probably not structured and certainly not standardized. Everybody's doing their own thing in their own region. Yeah. Farid?
But I do want to say that we do have the ability and the capacity to come together. There is no doubt about, if that is initiated, that the bands are going to, or the leaders, or so I have no doubt that that could happen.
You're muted, Farid.
I'm itching to ask the question, and if you don't want to respond, in terms of you want to, you prefer not to give an answer, you're free to do that. Nothing's wrong with that. But I have a question in the context of this. My concern is every year we have Panorama, and I often wonder what is the process to determine who the judges are on a year-to-year basis. I also am very curious as to, do they meaning Pan Trinbago, have meetings with the bands to discuss not the judging panel, but the criteria that the band must adhere to in order to put the band in the best possible position for competition? Do they have seminars? Does Pan Trinbago have seminars where they meet with the bands collectively and a pre-discussion, let us say 4 months, 5 months before the Panorama begins, that this sort of dialogue takes place with the bands? Does that happen?
All right, so let me first say that we all have an avenue to communicate to Pan Trinbago what we might want to communicate, right? So that could happen on an individual basis. But of course, when you have it in a symposium or something of the sort, it gives a little more credibility to it, right? And probably ensures that something will go further. But yes, they do, right? As far as I know, annually, there's arrangers are invited into a meeting with Pan Trinbago. I think there are a few judges present and that sort of thing. But I don't think it has worked. It doesn't. When the arrangers that I know, when they come out of those meetings or seminars, they don't feel that their fingers are more on the pulse to winning the Panorama or doing well. I've never been to the meeting myself, so I don't want to say too much. But to answer the question, yes, there are things in place, and I do know that there are workshops for the judges as well, right? The continuous problem that we have is where 5 people on a panel might have 2 or 3 different views of the same thing. And I'm not even saying the arrangement, that is broad. But let's say rhythm, for example. You might have some, and I know you have heard this a million times on this program, but one person will give 10. So if that person gives you 10, and of course, no feedback sometimes, so you don't even know what you're doing well. And and that same tune would warrant an 8 from another judge, and with little feedback as well. So you're not sure, what, but that's rhythm. But then you might have, let's say, for example, introduction. If somebody gives you a 10 and somebody gives you an 8, and the person with 8 say you could be a little more dynamic or what have you, do you change? But because you already have a 10 in the bag, or some 10. So for me, I know this is a belabored topic, but for me, I think for the integrity of the panel, that there should be some head judge, I don't know, I could be corrected here, that would say, hey, we can't send out variant messages to this one person. We have to be, as a panel, to protect our integrity. Why you give a 8 or why you give a 10? And have that little discussion there, and then say, no, well, okay, we put it out, whatever. I mean, you could give a 9, or you could stay with the 8 and the 10, but the comments, you have to be careful with those comments, because sometimes the comments are contradictory, and that no way that could help an arranger. And I know some arrangers, their reaction, they're not even reading the comments, and that is also counterproductive, in my opinion.
I am so glad you brought this up, and it's a very, very important part of judging a competition, and so what you're describing, a judge giving 8 and another judge giving 10, but the judge who's giving 8 is not giving you any feedback, or the comments are contradictory. That's only one part of it. That is the subjective interpretation of the judge. I think the problem goes even deeper, that what is described as the criteria on the form, each judge may have a different understanding of what that means. What it means to me is not what it means to somebody else. And that is another part, another layer of the issue with the competition. So I think we can only keep bringing it up and talking about it, so that maybe in time, changes will be made. What do you think of this rule that the judges are not allowed to confer?
As I said, for me, no, we going at how to put it? We're going to be challenging our culture, right? Where there is no way that after the competition, a Trinidadian or a Panman wants to wait 24 hours for the results. Yet still it happens in the mass, right? And, where the results come out 2 or 3 days after, right? So we're going against our tradition in one sense. But as I said, I believe in consultation. I'm going on a road here. I am not musically literate and I'm not whatever, right? But I'm more into sport, and it's just like watching a diver. You have one shot at watching a diver, and maybe you might miss something that your colleague would have seen, and that is why I think the consultation is important, because you have 8 minutes to hear a piece, and you might have, I want to say this because I'm also an educator. When you put on your head to write a comment, you are not hearing what is being played. People will challenge me on that, but in learning theory, you could only concentrate on one thing at a time. You understand? So I am saying it's human to miss something, and that is where the consultation, I think, will fill that gap.
Absolutely. And I always say, no, you use the word hearing. I would use the word listening, because hearing and listening are not the same thing. Hearing is a passive exercise. Listening is an active exercise. And I agree with you. When I'm judging a competition in music, I am just listening. You can't be writing at the same time. I completely agree with you. Now, so here's why I think consultation is good. I mean, it will sort of mitigate some of these discrepancies where judges have a different opinion. I understand why Pan Trinbago included that as a rule, because there might be a very strong personality on the panel who might sway somebody else. But as you say, somebody might have missed something. I judged a competition recently at the music festival, and this was a steel band category. Okay, there were 2 bands. I'm not going to name the bands. There were 2 bands played, and there were just 2 of us adjudicators there at the desk. We had the scores, but I had looked at the scores before the class, because I wanted to listen and look at what was going on. One band played very accurately, fluently. There were no musical errors. I could have commented on their phrasing or choices here and there. The other band got lost. They got lost in their scores. Somebody forgot a part, and that threw off other players. You know how that happens, right? Something goes wrong in one section, it affects other people. My colleague he had his head buried in the score, and he did not even hear that the band had gotten lost. So this is where, as you mentioned before, symposiums, workshops to help the judges prepare. How you prepare to judge. And I remember a conversation Fareed and I had with an arranger back in March, or was it February, where I said the same thing you just said. If I'm hearing an arrangement that is 8 minutes long, and this is the first time I'm hearing it, even somebody as experienced as I with listening to music, I can't hear every single detail in that band in 8 minutes on one hearing. I can't. the arranger disagreed with me. He said, no, you can. No, it depends on the complexity of the arrangement, right? Some things you need to hear it 4, 5 times to really, unless we have a score, we are given a score in advance, and then I can study the score and I know, okay, this is what I can expect. Yeah. And sometimes, as we know, the way the pans are arranged on the stage, we may not hear, the judges may not hear an inner voice because of the positioning of the pans. And we all know how it sounds on TV and radio is not how it sounds live. Yeah. So, I mean, these are all such important issues for the industry. So thank you for bringing them. I support you 100%. You can always get me to be a spokesperson if you're trying to convince Panchon Big or something. Fareed?
Tomorrow is the 29th of August. It would be 6 years since the passing of Ellie Manet. You know, very often in our history, we tend to forget the people that contributed in a major way. There's no way we can talk about Invaders without talking about Ellie Manet. Do you all have anything in store in terms of, well, I don't want to say in terms of remembering him, but in terms of celebrating his contribution to Invaders? Do you have any celebrations in store this year, and any commemorative event or anything of the sort, or is it something that you're still gelling in your mind's eye?
Well, I don't know. I would like to consider that we are more proactive. When we celebrated our 75th anniversary
2015.
in 2015, we actually had our first award ceremony. And whilst it was to recognize the present players and so on, it was also to recognize the contributors from the past. And of course, we'd have had some players, and then of course, we'd have iconic arrangers like Ray Holman and so on. Ellie and Kobojak, they were unable to come to Trinidad. And we actually went out to West Virginia to present that award to Ellie Manet. So, I mean, as I said, he was recognized in Trinidad in that ceremony. And although he couldn't make it, we went out there. We also went out to Kobojak and presented that award to him. So, I mean, we always remember that. We always value them. And as a matter of fact, we're still thinking, because I don't know if you know, Kobojak is still alive in the US. So we're still thinking about, you know, how we could celebrate him whilst he's alive. So I don't know if we still, you know, we could always be looking back, right? But I don't know if we have done enough. But certainly in terms of our history, in terms of our legacy, they are very much present in our history. To the how to put it, maybe to the detriment of our present history, because they still tend to overpower people who have done stuff in Invaders over the last 20 or 30 years, you know. So should I say, so strong have been their influence.
I was looking at the Invaders book. Ms. Namsu was kind enough to make a book available to me. Manet was saying that it's so important to write our history. Documentation is something that we seem to lack in Trinidad and Tobago in the context of Steelband's recording the history. Invaders has managed to put together a very strong historical document in terms of encapsulating everything that you all have done. And it's also very informative with regard to the Steelband in itself. Are there any plans, or mindfully speaking, to do any biography in the name of Ellie Manet? There's so much, you know, when you live abroad, as soon as a prime minister or president or somebody who served in public office remits office, everybody looks forward to their book. Have you all been in touch with his family or the Invaders family in terms of putting together, if not a biography in bond, at least some sort of booklet that records or reflects all his achievements. I know that your the Invaders 2015 75th anniversary book did go some way, but it would be nice. I mean, it would be good that and it's a good trend to start, because when I speak with some of the other steel bands and I ask about Neville Jules and I ask about Jit Samaru, um, there's no plan, and they just resort to the book that represents the band. Is there anything in the making, or any documentary that we can look forward to, or is it something that you food for thought in the future?
Well, the simple answer to that is no. But before I go there, I would like to thank Dr. Janine Remy and Ray Funk for putting together that fantastic book there, which covered our first 75 years. To get off on that point there, I don't think we should wait another 75 years to write anything of that sort. But in terms of a biography, no. But I want to say, you said that we are not a culture of recording our history, and that is true, because we are a storytelling culture. We record our history, by telling stories. And when you tell stories, by the time it reaches down to the fifth or the sixth person, stories go different ways. So I always boast that book is a history book of the evolution of Pan through the eyes of Invaders, right? Now getting back to storytelling, and that book was written from personal interviews, right? Dr. Janine and Ray Fong, they interviewed these individuals, and I think, there's much of a biography of Ellie Manet in that book, as well as a little of Kobo Jack and that sort, but very much so Ellie Manet, life has been covered there to a large extent. And I must say, in terms of Trinidad, I mean, I know he did a lot more since he left I think it's 67. He spent most of his life, the rest of his life in the US. So I know there's a heavy part there too. But I think we really captured the Invaders part of it.
Well,
yeah. No, Richard, go ahead.
I just want to congratulate you on the publication of that book. I think it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And I think recording the history is so important for the future generations. You both know there are some young musicians today who do not know the people who came before them, who were pioneers in the field. They wouldn't even recognize the name and the importance that pioneer, the wealth of their work that made the pan industry what it is today, right?
Definitely. So, I want to quote Ainsworth Mohammed, because just the other day he said that, what we are doing now, we are resting on the shoulders of the pioneers who went before, and we need to remember that. I started off by saying that we were working on a strategic plan, and involved in that would be, the structure that we would like to put up. 147 Tragreet Road, where we occupy at present, has been proposed a National Heritage Site. So on that site, what we are looking at in terms of development would be to have some sort of historic, significance to the place. And that would be in the form of pictures and, that sort of things, and a small museum. But how we are going now is digital. So that would be how the museum would be basically a digital museum. So we will, as you say, have our pioneers and our predecessors, remembered. And actually, if you have been to our Panyard lately, you would see we have a big picture of Birdie Manet, actually, a picture of him tuning a drum. So we do those things from time to time.
Excellent to hear about this virtual museum. Excellent idea, because if you have it virtual, the information can be shared with people beyond the shores of Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah. Now,
we also think of the present generation that has a problem reading.
Yes. Now, I know we're out of time, and but before you go, I have to give you a story. So years ago, when I was judging Panorama, Invaders got me in trouble, and here's what happened. In the preliminary round of Panorama, the judges were unanimous that Invaders should come higher than another very, very prominent band. I'm not going to call the name because it'll get me in trouble.
But you can
And
call it here.
no, I'll just say it was an arrangement by Ray Holman, and it
Okay.
was just beautiful. It was beautiful. And then what happened the next day, I was in Port of Spain, and a member of this big band stopped me in the street and said, "How you could put Invaders ahead of us? We are a big band. We are a big band. How you could do that?" So you all got me in trouble, huh? You know, when we judge in Panorama, we can't show our face in public. You know, we have to hide because the results always have a controversy. But I remember that event so well, and listening to Invaders play that arrangement by Ray Holman, it was just exquisite. So I just wanted to give you that story.
Well, thank you. And I think Arden would have heard that story as well.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Your volume. Your volume.
All right. Can you hear me now?
We hearing you now.
Beautiful. Welcome, one and all. I didn't hear that particular story, but I can identify with individuals having their own opinions, whether it's biased or I'm not, coming up to an adjudicator and wanting to express their personal feelings. I must say, being a judge in any steel pan competition is really tough. It is something that I don't even want to do, basically, because the sort of passion involved from the stakeholders and shareholders, it's really intense. So I can identify with situations like that, and I can tell you, it still continues.
So, Mr. Herbert, thank you so much for joining us. And I believe you live in New York City?
I live in Maryland.
In Maryland? Oh,
I
gosh,
used to be in New York, but I'm no longer there.
Okay. Maryland is a beautiful state. So I have a question for you, and this is about arranging. So if we have young budding pianists listening today, and they have this dream of one day arranging for Steelband, what would you advise that they be doing now?
Well, the first thing they must do is listen to the greats that went before them or still are active. Once you can do that and listen intensely, and listen with the intent to analyze and to understand, and then be able to develop a style, not just copy, but to develop and learn from, that is certainly the first step. What I've noticed in some young arrangers, because the climate is winning, or that's the priority, to win versus to contribute to the existing body of music, they would then listen to the trend and try to emulate and replicate that what have won before in the in terms of recent history. And then you have this sort of doldrum of cookie cutting arrangements. So they all sound very similar because of that need to win.
Right. And that was one of my questions. So you hit it the nail on the head. I wanted to talk about this issue because the way it's structured right now, we're talking about Panorama. The way it's structured right now and the criteria that the judges are given, it seems to me, having judged Panorama and having looked at the most recent score sheets and the criteria listed for this year, 2024, seems to me that the industry is not allowing for You use the word develop. It's an excellent term. The industry is not allowing for developing new paths and new ideas. Everybody wants to win, so it turns out to be formulaic. We hear the same tropes and patterns that we've heard from winning bands in the past. Do you think that therefore the criteria need to be modified to allow for development in the industry in terms of arrangement?
I mean, I think the criteria is solid enough if followed by the adjudicators, and then there must be contributions from the arrangers, because there needs to be a dialogue, because there is a sort of disconnect between the arrangers and the adjudicators in terms of the understanding of what that criteria is. Um, Sometimes we have dynamics in a particular category, and you use 4 or 5 or 6, but how much dynamics do you need? Um, and for some reason, there is not that progressive conversation between the arrangers or the music creators and the adjudicators. I don't know if there is a reason why, um, you know, the powers that be haven't had that sort of progressive and productive and meaningful dialogue, but it's necessary. Um, I heard you mention um, about not being able to fully analyze a piece of music the first time you hear it for 8 minutes, and some people, head well, or I guess your colleague or the other adjudicator head was down and not really engaged in the performance. I think that is so necessary, because there's so much that goes on in a panorama arrangement. Um, I, as an arranger, if I didn't arrange that particular piece, there is no way that I can tell you what the middles are doing, what the chords are doing. So, from that perspective, it's necessary that the judges be familiar with what they are going to critique versus just an overall sound. Um, and I think by doing that, um, the sort of development and creativity would reach the optimal level that it should be.
I'm happy to hear you say that. You know, you mentioned dynamics a moment ago. Let's talk about that a little bit. You know, when I see dynamics on a score sheet and it says 10 marks, now I'm thinking, okay, the arranger is going to put in some changes in dynamics just to get those 10 marks. But the arrangement itself and the variation of the number of pans that are playing at a particular point will already affect the dynamics. Not everybody's playing all the time throughout the 8 minutes, right? So variation of numbers of players, and to use a musical term, a variation of textures, is actually going to affect dynamics.
Correct.
So that's part of the creativity of the arrangement. Why do we need to put points just for dynamics? Because we don't put points for notes. We don't put points for rhythm. You know what I'm saying? We don't pass it out that way. Um, your thoughts about that?
Well, definitely. I mean, there is a misnomer that dynamics is simply loud and soft, versus what you just said in terms of the texture, the orchestration. Whether you have a sort of layered structure, or whether you have extended harmonies that give you that full orchestration, or whether you have unison, so that you get that the difference in volume and focus, which provides the dynamics, not just loud and soft, crescendo here, loud, soft. No. Um, so, but the thing is, do judges and arrangers understand that criteria in terms of, does dynamics simply means loud and soft in terms of our cultural competitions, or dynamics have that broad range? So I just think it is so necessary to be able to articulate that and have the industry understand what is required, so that there isn't all, this misinformation that plagues the whole competition results, and it's very necessary.
Thank you so much. Fareed?
Mr. Hubert, I have to say a special thank you for making yourself available to us. I often bother Mr. Namsu and Michael quietly and ask him, could you use your powers to twist his arm into making himself available?
Well, once I get the call from either of them, done deal. There is no twisting of any arms. Arden, we need you on. This is the time. Make yourself available. No problem.
I had the benefit of hearing the band at the World Steelband Day at Woodford Square.
Mhm.
What sort of pressure does the band feel from you? You are the one who I would imagine that raises the tempo, lowers the tempo, creates the heat, turns the temperature down. Do you find that you get more out of the players outside of competition rather than within when you're preparing for Panorama? Because when I listen to the band at Woodford Square, they seem so relaxed, and you seem to be more at peace, if I may put it that way, by my observation. The band seems to be enjoying itself a lot more. As I looked and I said, but I see a version of Invaders for Panorama and a different version outside of. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but there's certainly a dynamic that you see the difference at times. What sort of pressure it is as an arranger working with the players that you think manifests itself in a Panorama season and releases itself outside of the season?
Well, from an arranger's and performer's perspective, we always feel pressured in terms of performing credibly. So whether it is in the Panyan and we're doing a simple performance. I know the orchestra has the storm, the practice sessions that occur every. Well, I guess Liz can kind of speak to exactly when that happens. But even if it's in the Panyan or it's in another steel band function or a private function or on Panorama, the pressure is always there to play as perfectly as possible. I think the difference is the tentative consequence of not being as perfect as you can. Because say for Steel Band Day, the band played excellently. If something went a little off, the consequence isn't as dire as if that happens on the Panorama stage. Because there is so much I guess more prestige from that local pressure standpoint. So there is always pressure again in terms of, and when I say pressure, good pressure, in terms of always performing at a high, excellent level and great quality. But again, I think it's just the results of competition versus a performance or some sort of festival.
I asked that question, and this, I guess, a question arising out of that. Very often I've heard arrangers, I remember Booksy Sharp said years ago that what you hear from a steel band on Panorama final night, it's more or less what the judges want to hear. The comments, if you follow the comments made by judges from the prelims into the semifinals, the arranger at times it feels a certain level of pressure to change some of the things that he's doing, meaning gel the song along the lines of where the comments is taking you, because you're looking to win. So
Right.
do you feel when you're arranging that there is what we hear, we the listening public hear by final night is more or less a dictation guided by judges' comments, or you remain true to what you do and try to build around it?
Excellent. I can say that I've had conversations with Dr. Sharp and the C's Bradley, and they have always told me be true to myself, and Dr. Malman. They have always told me be true to yourself. You know, you can read the comments, but don't follow the expectations of the judges. Um, so I do not strictly ever change the music based on one judge's comment. Now, if say is the general consensus of the panel for some reason, and I can identify with that reason, then I would modify. As an arranger, I know what we have done in preliminaries. I'm in the panyard drilling the band, so I know the sections that need work, that needs more clarity. I know well by final night, we are going to increase that wow factor, because as a ranger, sometimes we hold things back from the preliminary round to drop that surprise, that element of a surprise. So it is not that one follows the dictates of a judge, because again, sometimes they hear the piece for the first time, sometimes they don't understand the piece, and sometimes even among that panel there are conflicting views on the same piece. So who do you follow? Be true to yourself, and you can live with yourself rather than being someone else.
Just to follow up on that, Mr. Herbert, those were great comments. And just to follow up on that and zoom out a little bit. So, the high stakes of the panorama competition, there's always going to be one winner unless there's a tie. That's a whole nother discussion, tying. But there's one winner, and then everybody is ranked. And so one can only imagine the disappointment that players have put into the work if they come second, third, or ninth, or whatever they come. So could you speak to the importance of competition versus performance opportunity outside of a competition?
Our culture puts the competition as priority. They look at panorama as the mecca of steel pan competitions. That is something that's inbred. It has been there, and that's good. So I've heard some people say that panorama is killing pan, but I don't think that the competition, the panorama, is killing pan. I think there's so much more aspects and facets that contribute or that surround the panorama that leaves that adverse feeling. So, but panorama is really a special gathering of people. It's just like the Olympics. You find that most records are broken during Olympics, during those sort of world games, because it's the meeting of the greatest of the greats. So panorama is a great thing. It actually brings people from all walks of life. You find individuals who in the medical profession, you have doctors in the panyards, attorneys, you have accountants, you have everybody from every walk of life coming during that panorama season to play in your band. People are reaching to work late. Some people are not going to work. Some people are sleeping at work. Some of those kids are sleeping in class. So there is a magnet and a power about panorama. I just think that we need to find a much efficient way of dealing with the adjudication one, dealing with the compensation, dealing with the schedules, and that would improve. I think if we could also find um, a more equitable, logical way of adjudicating, individuals may be more willing to say like, yeah, although they are biased towards their bands, they would understand more. One of the aspects of adjudicating for Panorama and the combination is I always believe in the consensus result versus the points. And I want to ask you that because you have judged and for many years. What do you think about the consensus? So in terms of if there's a panel of 5 and 3 judges have band A first and 2 judges have band A second, and then you have 2 judges have band B first and 3 judges have them second, then how could the will of the minority precede the will of the majority? What do you think about that as an adjudicator?
Well, we were just discussing this with Mr. Dinchong, this particular notion. I believe there should be some consensus. I believe there should be room for discussion amongst the panel. Now, I didn't get a chance to say this when Mr. Dinchong brought it up. He said, our cultures, after the competition, people don't want to wait 24 hours for the result. We don't have to wait 24 hours because the bands take at least 20, 25 minutes to get off and get on stage. So we have 25 minutes between bands to discuss. What did you think of this modulation here? Wasn't that amazing? I was expecting him to go to the subdominant and he went this way.
Right.
And as we were talking about before, as a judge, in the absence of a score provided in advance where we could study the piece, some judges will pick up certain elements in the first hearing and some will not. And that's where a discussion amongst the panel will help. I think the benefits of that far outweigh the negative impact of not speaking to another judge. And so a band could play. We have a little conference. What did you think? We're not telling people what mark to put,
right? Mm-hmm.
But and it becomes more critical when we're discussing the top 3 bands before the final results are not. That's where it becomes more critical. Now, I've always wondered, how could a band win the Panorama by half a mark? It's not that close, In my opinion, it's not that close. That means you have to be giving a band 98.5 and next band you're giving them 98. I'm just using a round, you know what I mean? In my opinion, it is not that close. And so I don't understand how a band could win by a half a mark or even 1 mark. I don't think it's that close.
That's close, Ryan.
What do you think? You think it's that close?
I believe if it's that close, again, I'm not a judge, so that and I know that is again, as I said, it is a role that I do not want to sit in at all. It is possible that if a judge, based on their rubric, decides I'm going to give this band a 0.5 because I found they were a bit harsh, and then not remembering that they gave that band a 0.5, decide I'm going to give this band 98 across the board. So it is possible based on the rubric and the scores employed, but it also leads to that sort of 0.5 where that 0.5 comes on from. And I also think that when you minimize, say, the sample size of the judges, because the throwing out of the highest and lowest, I think at this stage I have a problem with. because I believe the thinking behind that, or the reasoning behind that, is to avoid bias. So, there's ban. But my thing is, if you inherently saying that there's bias on the panel, how am I supposed to feel as an arranger? If you have 5 individuals that you employ and you can't trust the integrity of their scoring, why even have 5? Why put 5 people and then saying, well, I'm not taking 2 scores because, hey, they may be biased? Things like that, to me, the optics are not the greatest.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up this about eliminating the highest and lowest score. The problem is even deeper than that. Yes, the optics of why would you expect bias on a panel of judges? But here's another issue with this matter. I was known to be a tough judge, right? Pantrin Bagel used to tell me all kind of things like, you real tough boy, you real tough. And I'm writing a lot of comments. I would never give a score sheet without comments. So if I'm giving you a mark, I'm going to tell you what I thought and justify why you got this mark. But here's the issue. So if I'm a tough judge, I am scoring, my scale is calibrated lower, which means I run the risk now of all my scores being eliminated, and vice versa if you're on the high end. So what's the point of me being on the panel? So
Exactly.
I think this is an inherent problem in that rule.
Exactly. Because I mean, there are some judges, as judges say, that their calibrations are very low. But if you look at their positioning now, so you may get band A a 65, and band B a 75, and band C, I don't know, 69. A judge that gives a 95 and a 98 and a 89 is the same positions. So it doesn't really matter to me in terms of the points, but in terms of the positions that those points have the bands aligned.
Correct. So what should happen, and we will, if Pantrin Bago is listening, we can do our scoring on our sheets individually, but then when we consult, we're talking about the position of the results, not points, because points is too clinical and art is not a clinical thing.
Correct.
There's so many elements to, this as a musician, there's so many elements to music that you cannot quantify in a score. When I say score, a numeric score, right? The way something is phrased, how do you quantify that with a number? The originality in the harmonic language, how do you quantify that with a number? I think art is much more complex than just representing it with numbers. So I agree with you. I think we can do the scoring so we keep track, but ultimately it should be the positioning of the bands. Well, after I say all of this, Pantrin Bago will never ask me to judge again. Although I have to pick up on what you said before, people, I'm glad you said it's hard. And I think Mr. Dinchong also said, I can tell you, it is extremely hard. If we are being honest with ourselves, it is extremely hard. When we're hearing preliminaries and all those bands for so many hours after the first 10 bands, everything becomes a blur unless a band is so outstanding and they come late in the process, and so they stand out. And one of the things we were discussing, Farid and I, with the arrangers, we were asking them, do you think it's important where your band plays? Is it better to play first or last or in the middle? I think it depends on who comes before you. It depends on how late into the night it comes. You could make a great impression coming first, but I think you can make a greater impression coming after a lot of mediocre bands and being outstanding. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I definitely agree, because I've always, from the theory of panorama, is one, on stage at a particular time. We don't know what that time is. So sometimes a band may have a really beautiful arrangement, but they happen to come up behind one of the big bands, and for some reason, that beautiful arrangement, if um, placed in a different position where the observers and the listeners couldn't hear it, is like whoa. But coming behind sometimes a big band, especially when that big band leaves, and then all their supporters from the audience, they leave too. Sometimes you end up playing to an empty sort of audience. Um, so it is not scientific in terms of the position. It just happens to be what happens at that point in time and that space. I was speaking to a couple of my colleagues recently, and I was telling them that maybe we need to have this sort of ability to trade positions, like how some of the professional sports can, you want to trade this, whatever. And so you say, hey, I believe, if in fact a band A believes that they have a better position if they play in a particular, or a better chance of getting a better result playing in a particular position, they go to band B and say, hey, I will give you X amount if you allow me to play here. Now, to me, that works because it's financial transactions, and that may help a smaller band say, hey, you know what? If we can get a 50,000 or 100,000 from this band that is going for $1 million, and they believe that that position is worth it, I think that sort of a transaction could also boost the whole thing, and it creates excitement.
Great, great. You're developing a whole other part of the industry there.
Traded positions.
Mr. But I was looking at some of the panorama history, and keeping into what Richard just walked us through and what you all were discussing. In 1963, Pan Am North Stars won the panorama. In 1964, they repeated. In a conversation with Anthony Williams, the then arranger, he stated that in 1965, when they were going for the hat-trick of panorama titles, Pan Am North Stars performed first, and Guinness Cavaliers, they performed last. And he said that North Stars lost the panorama by half a point in 1965. They lost. They were going for the hat-trick, and Guinness Cavaliers pipped them by half a point. And what he said is he believed that he was at a disadvantage in performing first in 65, that Cavaliers performed last, and that the impression and the music that they would have heard, having heard Cavaliers last, the judges, that he couldn't recover from that. The band were at a disadvantage in terms of the band that performed last and whose music was fresh in its head. It's simply that he felt that they would have long forgotten the North Stars performance, because North Stars performed first. What is your position in terms of when you have to deal with on a final night, your placing in performing?
Well, I mean, I am from a school of thought that says it makes no difference where you pull, you play where you pull. And I preach this to the band and players. Our music is our music. Let's go there and let us set the benchmark if in fact we are playing first. So that and there have been panoramas where bands that played first stayed first and won the panorama. So to what Richard said, sometimes you have to be so spectacular that it's just a closed case. But what I have done when I did judge school panorama, I will always have an extra sheet of on paper where I will keep the scores right there, so that I know if band A was at, and say that like, because sometimes we can't remember what scores we gave. So if I gave, band A 95, and we going on 82, right? And then later on, the last band played really superbly. I need to remember, hey, in my opinion, this band was the best band for the night. And I have to go back and say, what did I give to band A to ensure that I was as close to perfect and fair in my adjudicating. So that what I have always done is keep an extra sheet and knowing, okay, well, this is but right. And adjust whatever scores I need to, because again, we all humans. So that sometimes we think, hey, I'm doing the right thing, but not understanding. Sometimes you're there for hours upon hours. How can you remember every single band and every single position? So that is what I have done. And maybe if a couple of the judges back then did that, I don't know. Maybe the band that won was supposed to win, but in terms of Mr. Williams' belief, maybe if that was done, he may have gotten the hat trick. I don't know.
Richard, you sat in that judge's seat before. Do you all do what Mr. Hubert is saying there? You keep a note of what the...
I always did. I always kept my scrap paper so I would know how the ranking was coming out according to my impression. But there's this rule that once you fill in the score sheet, the official score sheet, and you write your comments, it's taken away from you. So you don't have the luxury, as Mr. Herbert is saying, when I get to band number 15, I'm looking at the scores. I know where I want to rank them, but maybe I want to adjust the score because these two bands were not 1 point apart. It was more like 4 points. So I want to adjust the score, but I can't because that form has gone, right? So I think that is something that is not ideal. I think the score sheets should be in front of the judges for the whole competition. Because here's another point. We hear an arrangement and suddenly it triggers a comment about texture. We hear a band where the variety of textures is so brilliant. And then we remember, that band I heard in the last hour, they would have benefited from some change in texture. Let me go back to their comment sheet and add that comment. I hadn't thought about it at the time, but when I'm hearing this band now, this is a prime example of excellent. You see what I mean? So there's no mechanism to go back and change a score or to add or detract a comment. You might think after hearing 15 bands, I should have told that band it was too loud, because these bands are much louder. Let me go back and change that comment. Once you put down your comments and the score, it's taken away from you. I don't think it's a good system. You see why they will never ask me to judge again?
But I'm saying there must be dialogue because the aim is to make the competition better and fairer. And if in fact, in terms of say time, because again, Steelband competitions are long. It's hours upon hours. People start getting restless, the audience. Maybe that is a consideration that needs to be looked at. So again, I don't know. I am not in the administration. But I just believe in order to make the industry so much more efficient, we must have dialogue. Solely and primarily aimed at improving our festivals, our panoramas, all our events. Because again, the instrument is a national instrument. The instrument has been recognized by the United Nations, and we have World Steelband Day, so that we can't just sit back and keep doing the same things that we used to do just for the sake because we used to do it like that. We must improve. We are on the global stage, and that light is shining so much more brightly, and hence we need to change and adapt to that pedestal that we have yearned for and we have it now. We have that voice. So there's no reason for dialogue. Again, I'm not here to say that any specific or organization must do A, B, and C. I'm saying that it's only through dialogue and a diversity of ideas we can achieve that.
A question that I must ask. How do you, in your mind's eye, work out a tune of choice for a panorama competition? When I look at 2005 to 2023, if I'm correct, you've chosen 3 times. You've used the Baron with say in 2005, in 2015 this Melody Suite. I believe in 2020 was another Baron song.
Feeling it, yeah.
Feeling it,
yeah.
You seem to have a taste for, I don't want to say the more traditional music, but you in 2017 you chose full extreme, so you're quite versatile. What happens in your mind when you're choosing a song for competition like Panorama?
Well, let me also say, I believe from 2009, I think 6 years beyond that, I did my original composition. So I've gone traditional, modern, and own original composition. It is always a collaboration with myself, the music team, the music coordinator, the management by extension, and players. So I always get feedback, and I try to use logic and reasoning. If I'm simply say, well, I just like that tune because I like the tune, and then I realize, well, the tune doesn't have this sort of chord progression and harmonies that I think can be developed to be a competitive piece, then I will always err on the side of reason. Sometimes it may not seem that I'm listening, but I always do. I always have that inclusive session, that feedback. Sometimes we would choose 3 or 4 songs and we put on a verse and chorus, and depending on how it sounds, you see a natural gravitation to a particular choice. So there are times we do that. There are times that again, the music team, by extension the management, we will say, you know what, we're going old school. This is where it's at, or you know what, we're doing something modern. So it's a combination and varying factors. It isn't just one thing where the arranger says, well, okay, I'm doing this and that's the be all and end all. I do not believe in that. I believe in inclusivity and collaboration.
It was Silver Stars. One of the Pushat brothers had said that people don't come to hear Panorama, they come to see Panorama. Mm-hmm. In recent years, the judges seem to be going for a little more theatrics in their judgment and so on. How do you feel about that theatrical part of the performance?
Well, right. Well, let me say that I do not know that judges are leaning on the side of theatrics. So let me, push back on that just a little bit. What I can say is that the marketing and branding and performance is not just a performance; it's now a production. So it isn't just because that's just the way of the music industry. Period. If you try to compare performances from the 70s, the 60s, the 80s, is very different now. So that music shows aren't just a beautiful performance, it's a production. And and I think that is a great thing, because we need to clearly market our product. But we should not get distracted. And I don't believe judges get distracted or, go on the side of theatrics. I think bands are able to enhance their performances and be able to telegraph their music through visual means. And that's a great thing.
Yeah. Richard.
Well, I agree with him completely. And I can say, as a judge, former judge, theatrics and pyrotechnics didn't sway my opinion. I was listening to the music. But as he said, it's a show. It's a show. So it not only enhances the performance, it gets the crowd riled up. And the performers feed off of that vibe. Yeah, but there are no marks on the score sheet for theatrics.
Mr. Herbert, what are your plans right now leading into Panorama 2025? What do you do in that off time when you're not in Trinidad?
Well, I'm always submerged in music. As I always tell people, that Panorama doesn't start when they gave the dates. Okay, this is prelims, this is semis. I am working on sketches from the time we hit that last note. I'm working on sketches and ideas. And next year is going to be really special for myself and Invaders, because that's going to be my 20th year arranging for Invaders, started in 2005. So it is going to be a spectacular year. I can assure you that. I'm not making any predictions, but I can assure you it's going to be a spectacular year. Not just in terms of the arrangement, but in terms of the sort of panorama environment and village we are going to create on Tragreed Road. So I'm going to invite everyone to whatever plans they have, make sure and take a night or two off to come down at 147 Tragreed Road next year during the panorama preparations. And the panyard won't just look as the traditional panyard. It's going to be vibrant. It's going to be energetic. So that the plan is for that sort of spectacular year and continue beyond that.
Stay with us. Maybe we could ask Ms. Namsu a burning question. Tell us something, Ms. Namsu, about your Invaders' next event, in terms of what you all have in plan. I know that this is that time of year when you all have the Republic Day Juve, but anything you wish to highlight in terms of your immediate events plan?
Yes, Farid. What I really want, we have, as Arden had mentioned early on, we have something called Stormy Practice, which is ready to get. When we're doing the practice, people naturally walk into the panya, they come and they listen and that kind of thing. So now we have a rehearsal is actually geared towards a performance. So it is we encourage members and friends that come into the panyard on a Thursday. We have, seating, entertainment, and be part of the whole rehearsal process. You might run the tune, you might stop the tune, but at least you're part of the building of the repertoire and gives you insight into the preparation that the band goes through for a gig. So it is you get close up and personal and see actually what is taking place. So it's an enjoyable event, and it's just to bring the life back into the panyards and have something for people to do on a Thursday night. They're always looking for something to do and have that live district entertainment going on. So that takes place this Thursday at 7:30 p.m. and we go till about 10. And we encourage everyone to come out and enjoy that. Now, The next event after that is, of course, our traditional, since 1989, we've been doing the Invaders Sidewalk Breakfast for the Independence Day. The parade passes right in front of Invaders Vineyard. So we have, it's you know, it is an artisan event because all this stuff is homemade. Everybody who could make their own homemade saltfish, choker, all these different things. And so everybody, the members bring out stuff. It's a traditional way of doing things. And we usually attract a lot of people. We have extra seating this year because we now have this huge venue. So, and the Invaders Youth Steel Orchestra will be performing, as well as Brimbler's Steel Orchestra, and then we have a DJ as well. So please, we encourage everybody to come out and wear their red, white, and black and come and celebrate with us. And the parade passes right in front. It's great for kids too. And later that evening, of course, we will be on Panani Avenue. That takes place on the Arpita Avenue afterwards. All the bands will be there and Invaders will be there on their trailer on Panani Avenue. And our major annual event is our Invaders Juve, which takes place on Republic Day at 4 a.m. in the morning in front of Invaders Vineyard. This is a traditional, we call it redefining tradition. And it is the largest traditional steel band Juve, and it's organized by a steel band. So in the world, right, the largest traditional steel band Juve in the world. And we bring back the tradition of the racks on the road. So all the band, our performing bands, it's bands from within the community. We are on racks on Chagrit Road. You have to push the racks on the road, and it is really an awesome experience going back in time. You're close up and personal with all the bands. You know, it's Starlift, Phase 2, Invaders, of course. We have Desperados still in with us. We have Power Stars, the Police Band, and we have, and everybody comes out in their old mass outfit, but we also bring our own mass presentation. And this year we are doing Pirate Invasion. Every year it's an invasion, pun on Invaders. So this year it's Pirate Invasion, and we have our own costumes on sale as well. So we could always contact the band or email us on the invaders1940@gmail.com if you want to book your costume. And after we finish with the route, we have what we call an after party where we have BP Renegades and other artists performing. And that is just another awesome experience. It's the fat part of it. So the parade is the Juve is, of course, free to the public, but you could support by joining the band and purchasing costumes from the band. And of course, there's a small entrance fee for the after party, which is just 50 TT. So we're working very hard towards that. And have you ever been? Dr. Tanya or Fareed?
Not recently, because you remember I lived abroad for a long time. Huh? I only recently came back to that.
Well, the interesting thing about this event is that we have a lot of the diaspora returning just for the event. And this year we're going to be celebrating our 10th edition. So it started in 2015 and it's now the 10th edition this year. So it is a milestone event in our calendar, and a very unique event as well, as we try to redefine the tradition of bringing the racks back on the road, because we are trying to create a space for steel band in Juve again, because we have lost that space in Carnival. The DJ trucks and all the other things, we no longer have that space. So now we are trying to recreate that space for Pan on the Road.
Do you all have any special memorabilia that you'd be you'd have on sale. I noticed that some steel bands have legends T-shirts where they commemorate their legends on their T-shirts. Do you all have any initiative along those
Yeah.
lines? Just like we
Yes,
have to put Aaron on a legends T-shirt. It's 20 years.
Thanks, Farid.
well, Arden is a legend now, so that's good. But we have something called the heritage collection, where we use the old. We have a lot of wonderful old photographs, and we use the old photographs as part of the artwork for the heritage collection, and it has a little bit of the history on the back, history of the band on the back. And this year in particular, we used a lot of the old photographs, and we infused it, and we actually made the final night uniform that the players wore were pictures of the old band and all the different founders and that type of thing. So that in itself is a keepsake piece that we have as well.
Mr. Herbert, we're nearing the end. I have a question that I would like you to add your voice to. I had a private dialogue with Ms. Namsu off air a few days ago, and I was asking her, in terms of arranging the pans on the night, meaning the frontline pans, the middle pans, and all the other pans. What is your input in terms of who plays where? And I would imagine that in arranging the pans, you also have to be mindful of the players who sit behind those pans. Is there, from an arranger's point of view, a formula in your mind's eye as to who you would like to be playing in up front, in the middle, on the end? Does that chemistry does the arranging of the players contribute in some intricate way to your arrangement?
Most definitely. First and foremost, I always liaise with the section leaders. So we have that discussion so that, I would say, hey, we need to get balance in order for the audience and the judges, to hear as much parts as possible, so that we won't just put tenors up on front just to hear melodies. So we'll have a certain amount of tenors, double seconds, guitars, cellos in that front line, and then you have the four pans, etc. So that once I determine the sort of balance based on the arrangement, hey, I know this section needs to come out a little bit more. You know what? I need 3 double seconds here. I need four pans in the middle, and then some on the outskirts. And I would say, hey, section leaders, I need some very proficient players. And I'm not going to use the word best, because best is subjective in all different sorts of ways. You have the technical proficiency. There are some players that could play so accurately, but then again, we know this is a show, so we also want players who can perform, because you just don't want a player that's standing stoically just playing notes. Again, we are in the visual performing arts, so you have the technical proficiency, what I like to say, the performance ability, and balance. So with all those 3 factors, I will discuss with the section leaders, because again, you do not want to put just your best players up in front, because you have to remember that the middle of the band, the side of the band towards the back, because there is also an audience at the back. So you just want to make sure that it is balanced and you have the strength of that chain. And then definitely you need chemistry. There are players that we like to say vibes with each other, and that transcends throughout the entire band. There are players who may play in the first row, or in terms of the rack, the second row, the third row, and they're seeing that these more experienced players having fun and it just transcends, and then everyone just starts, it just starts to grow and grow, so that those players out front too also act as role models for the entire band. So there's definitely, as I say, there is the collaboration with the section leaders, because of course in the steel band industry, particularly for Panorama, a lot of people love to be seen and love to play out in front. And I always make sure that the section leader understands, when you're choosing someone, know that the basis is that criteria we set. In addition to attendance, you may have really good players, but they come when they want or whatever, so that we also factor that into the selection of players, so that we're always on very solid ground for making decisions. Now, not everyone would always be happy, but we know we're doing it from a position of fairness and equity.
I want to take the opportunity to thank you all. You've shared our 145 minutes with us, and we've come to the very end. It was a lovely evening. It's great sharing time with you all, Mr. Herbert, Ms. Namsu, and Mr. Ding Chong. This afternoon, we have had Shell Invaders Steel Orchestra sharing its time with us. We thank you, Mr. Tangyok, for your wisdom and technical expertise and sharing with us your time. And thank you so much, Invaders. We look forward to another occasion with you. And Mr. Herbert, we'll use Ms. Namsu and
let me just give a plug again. Please come out, support Invaders on their Republic Day Juve. You can email invaders1940, that's invaders1940 @gmail.com. We'll be celebrating our Diamond Edition. This is our Diamond Edition. It is a real gemstone. And as I'm saying, I'm telling everyone, come out, make sure and get the information, invaders1940 @gmail.com. And you will have a very good and safe time. Mr. Tanyok, you say that you have returned recently. You need to come out to that event.
I will be there. I'll be there.
Beautiful.
Blessings, everyone. Thanks so much.
Fareed, before we go, could I just mention to Ms. Namsur and Mr. Herbert, are you aware of the scholarship being offered by Angostura Foundation in the performing arts? It was only announced a few days ago, and there's been some press coverage on it over the past weekend. So I'm just going to encapsulate it very quickly because I know I'm out of time. It's one scholarship, full scholarship for university study in North America for a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago between the ages of 16 and 25 in either music, dance, or drama. It's an amazing opportunity. This scholarship covers tuition, living expenses, travel, university fees, incidental fees, health insurance, books and supplies, materials. It covers everything. One student in the performing arts. So if anybody's interested in our list, you go to angostura.com and all the information is there.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Enjoy the evening, everyone. Be safe.
All right.
Blessings.